Everybody, welcome back to 32 All the Way, the summer edition. I know I've been saying for the last couple of months that I was going to get back up and running, but like with everybody else, trying to get our lives back to normal, regular day job stuff, it's not always easy. So I've got 3 or 4 authors that I've been talking to for the last couple of months who seem to have really great stuff and have helped me as well. So I'm trying to do the same thing. And today, our very first one is going to be Brenda Marie Smith. And we're going to do what I call the preview a review. How are you, Brenda?
I'm good, Paul. How are you?
I'm all right. Can't complain. So what we're going to look at today with you is your first book in this series is called If Darkness Takes Us, which was released in 2019. You also have something coming up in the same series in about a little over 2 months. You said August 24th, called The Light Escapes.
If the Light Escapes.
If the Light Escapes, sorry. So we're going to try and talk about that stuff a little bit, some generalities, why you were, not why you're writing, but, when you started, what you want to do with it, that kind of thing. Let's start at the top. Give us a little bit of If Darkness Takes Us without giving it away to everybody.
Okay. Grandmother B. Crenshaw, she's been an environmentalist all her life, and she's very worried about the direction the environment's heading. And she inherits $2 million from her aunt, and she doesn't tell her husband about this. Her husband is Hank. She calls him Hank the Crank. And she uses the money to buy the house behind hers and fill it full of food and seed and tools and survival gear for a disaster that she feels certain is coming. She just doesn't know what kind of disaster it will be. Anyhow, she's keeping her 4 grandchildren for a long weekend while Hank the Crank and her grown kids go up to Dallas for the OU Texas football game. And while they're gone, a solar pulse strikes Earth and takes out the grid and all the cars. And which also means no internet, no telephones, no running water. And she's left alone with 4 grandkids to try to take care of them and teach them how to survive off the grid and how to grow their own food and such. And, that's that's basically the setup for the story. And it's just a lot of teenager drama being managed by an elderly grandma whose health is failing.
Okay. So where are you classifying yourself here? Horror, mystery, a little bit of YA?
Sci-fi. Post-apocalyptic sci-fi.
Okay.
It's kind of a thriller, actually.
Okay.
A little bit of one.
Now, what was the bigger inspiration for this? Things you've read before? Is this something that you thought it just came to you and I said, I'll write the idea? Do you think, I don't want to say based off something else, but we all obviously have our ideas from something we've read or something
I've had the idea for a while to write a story about a grandmother with her grandkids in an apocalypse. It took me quite a while to find the right disaster.
All right, great.
Because I didn't want to kill everybody off.
There is no nonfiction in this.
Correct.
It's all right. Just wanted to check. All right, cool. So what we can do is, again, I apologize if the camera's not off. Brenda's having a little bit of issues on her end. We're going to try and get that fixed for the next time so we can interact a little bit better. But we thought maybe we would ask you to read a page or two so we get a little bit of idea of what we're looking at here.
Okay. So this is from the first page, the opening page of the book. No matter how desperately a mother loves you, she can only put up with so much. And so the day came when Mother Nature lashed out against us. I understood where nature was coming from. My family never listened to me either, which is why I didn't tell them about the guns I'd bought. The whole thing started with the train wreck. On a Friday in early October, the young adults in my family went to to the Oklahoma-Texas game up in Dallas, a big football rivalry around here. They dragged my husband, Hank the Crank, along with them, leaving me in South Austin with my grandchildren. At the time, I was glad to see Hank go. He'd been making me crazy since he retired, hovering like a gnat, micromanaging my coffee making, griping at me for reading instead of waiting attentively for him to spout something terse. Lord, I needed a break from that man. The 3-day trip to Dallas seemed perfect. I wasn't a built-in babysitter type of grandma, and I only saw my 4 grandkids together as a group on birthdays and holidays. For weeks, I'd been excited about spending a long weekend alone with them. A cruel trick sometimes, getting what you ask for.
All right, thank you very much. So are you, we've dealt with the fact that this is totally nonfiction, science fiction, you're working in that area. Have you tried to pin anything on anybody, so to speak? Have you based anybody on family members, kids? You might not want to tell me, but.
Well, Bee's a little bit like me, only she's more straight-laced than I am. You know, I'm kind of a old hippie myself, but she's not. But and then I used, you know, family member names for some of the characters. I highly recommend, if you have a grandson named Miles, do not name a kid in your story Milo.
Yeah, you know what? I use the same old joke with everybody. My first one fell into 2 categories, where most people would say to me, I cannot believe you made me a character in your book. And then the other half of the people can all say, man, I can't believe you did not make me a character in your book.
Right.
So some of them were, you know, some of them were annoyed that they weren't put in. The other ones were annoyed that they were put
in. They're really not. They're more like amalgamations of kids. You know? My husband and I have 5 sons between us.
Okay.
And but I scrambled them all up. I didn't, you know.
You forget how much other people remember. You know, where they might come back and say, I remember this conversation. You think, how did you remember that? There's no way you remembered that, but obviously they have if they're coming back and asking you about it.
With my first novel, people would always ask me, this is about you and your ex-husband, right? And I would say, well, he was bad, but he wasn't a supernatural stalker.
You know what? I think everybody just wants that inside track.
Yeah, they
where
do.
They're like, tell me this, tell me that. And I think we all have to learn, me, but definitely being an amateur at this, you don't want to give too much away when you're talking to people. But I also don't, you know, I don't want to be that guy who gives you the same pat answers. It always annoys me when you see somebody on different shows and you're like, well, he's going to say this, he's going to say that. But it's just, you know, it's hard because people just, more so than with books with movies, with TV shows, they read this book and it's just, you know, I've already had people say, you know, this is the greatest thing I've ever read. And I have to tell them, well, no, it's not. It's not at all.
Right.
Or people say, you know, I could read this all day. And I'm like, I'm really flattered, but I'm sure there's other stuff you could read too.
Yeah.
So it's always amazed how, you know, someone will reach out to you. Your review, by the way, thank you, was fantastic.
Oh,
you kind of nailed the head.
I love the book. I really did. So, but I have friends and relatives who don't read very much. And so when they read my books, they go, oh, this is the best book I've read in 10 years, but it might be the only book they've read in 10 years, you know what I'm saying?
You know, it's so polarizing. You want your family and friends to come forward and, you know, support you. But I mean, sometimes it might be something they just don't read about or they're not enjoyable.
Yeah, I've come to accept it. Some people just
you know, those generic reviews where you're not pointing out any kind of like anything succinct about the book or something that somebody might have missed. I had a whole bunch of people later on say, you know, can we do this? And I'm like, do me a favor. A, read the book, and B, bring in, you know, please just read the book before you do it. And B, bring up something that somebody would say, oh yeah, that was in the book. Because I don't want to go off on reviewers. I know we can bitch about them all day. But I had somebody bring up a whole bunch of points that were not in my book. And I was like, I don't know what you read, or what you think you read, but that it was not mine.
Yeah,
so, you know,
other people speed read. I think some people speed read and they miss a lot of things.
I'm sure you might have the same habit. Most authors do. I usually don't consider a book done until I've gone through it 2 or 3 times. Right?
Oh, I
So,
go through it 100 times.
there you go. And there's always still something when you're talking 400 or 500 page books that we might have missed.
Yeah, well,
Right?
and I'm lucky. I have a small publisher, and they have a real good editing system. So I get 3 different editors look at it. I have a development editor who helps me make sure the story's right. And then I have another style editor who helped me make all the connections and between things and, enhanced it. And then I have a copy editor who helped with all the grammar and inserted a million commas.
So are you still considered an independent?
Well, it's a small indie publisher. So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I
Okay.
mean, I self-published my first book, and I just hired a copy editor for it.
Again, there's a million questions to ask everybody about this. I try not to make the interviews about me, but gone through this with the first one, and then a second pressing of it, and then somebody wanted the third pressing, and then somebody still wasn't happy of it. And I'm like, look, I'm moving on to the second book, and I'm taking all that stuff as mistakes learned. Then
Right.
I'll try and fix all that for the next one. I said, because if I keep doing this, I'm never going to write another book, and I'm going to drive myself crazy.
Right.
But I just always find it interesting because we seem to be getting the mix now that I've met a couple people through Twitter and Goodreads that solely write independent books.
Mm-hmm.
And they've easily told me, they said, we're not rich. They said, but we're making an okay living. So right. I don't know. I guess there's positives of both sides. It just seems like, every 6 to 18 months you read about one of the bigger publishing houses closing again.
Right. I know.
So I wonder how much longer like any of those guys are going to be around till that's all done.
Well, I have a critique partner who is getting published by a big publisher just like a week or 2 after my book comes out. And he's getting so much great advanced publicity through them. That's, I think, the advantage with them.
All right. So, again, I apologize for the camera. When you are back next time, hopefully I have enough time that I can read, if you want to wait until the other one is released, can read If Darkness Takes Us and If the Light Escapes. So we'll definitely have a review for you for If the Darkness Takes Us. Hopefully we can get all the camera issues and all that put out by then. You sent me a whole bunch of great stuff, looking at your blog, looking at your page. We've been contacting each other back and forth on Twitter. Where is the best place for people to get a big chunk of your work? We're going to put all the links on the video, but where's your suggestion to start?
The place is to go to my website, which connects to everything else. So my website is BrendaMarieSmith.com.
Okay.
And there's links there to readings I've done. There's book blurbs and links to buy the book. There's
great.
Great.
Here's what we're going to do. Again, I apologize for the camera for both of our ends. So we're going to try and leave this one nice and short, but I wanted to bring you on because it seems like we've been talking about this forever.
Yeah.
We'll make a date once the camera's off to have you back for the other one, because again, the stuff that you posted for me, for my book, I can't thank you enough. There's some insight into the book, but also how you thought it tied to you personally. I always love when people do that. You know what I mean? You're telling me why you think that this was well done, and I really appreciate that. Mine is not exactly a lifestyle or something that most people know very much about. So it unfortunately gets very maligned sometimes.
I've kind of seen it all. So.
Yeah, you were saying in your earlier years. So were you the wild one or just your friends?
I was kind of in between wild. I mean, my parents thought I was wild because I hitchhiked away when I was 18 years old to California. Wow. Back when people did that. And
sorry, go ahead.
But I didn't do a lot of drugs or anything. So
it's always amazing, and you don't want to denigrate anybody, but you'll always have, for example, we had a guy a couple doors down from us that was just, the middle of the night, drove a car into a telephone pole, did all this other stupid stuff. And then finally one day I'm like, dude, enough. Like, don't make me be the guy that calls the police, because I don't want to do that. And then, I'm a Hell's Angel and I'm this and I'm that. Like, no, you're not, because you wouldn't be running up and down the street acting like this.
Right,
Someone
right.
always seems to be so quick to tell you uh, who they know or who they don't know. And because of the material I write about or some of the things I've experienced, it's nothing to brag about, but I'll say, okay, well, tell me who he is. Because chances are I know him, and I'm going to call him and tell him that you're acting like this, which to these guys is more terrifying than ever dealing with the police.
Right.
And it was just, you had those comments at the bottom, and I thought, you know what, we'll have to have an offshoot discussion one day, maybe off camera, just about that stuff.
Yeah.
Stuff you might not
Well,
want to tell
I
everybody.
lived in a hippie commune for
Oh yeah,
10 years, and my kids were delivered by midwives there, and we were
there's
a big
something
part of
there's
it.
something to be said for the alternative lifestyle, and I've talked about it for years. You know what I mean? Had my little house, had this, had that, but what I did for a living was not a nine to five job. But you know, it paid my bills. I had a motorcycle, I had a car. For quite a while, I was happy, but it's just unfortunately, I don't know how things progress in a commune, but the only way to rise any higher was for me to do a whole bunch of things that I didn't want to do.
Right.
So I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to go now. But yeah, the communist stuff must be really interesting. Was that a long term lifestyle choice?
Yes. Yeah, I lived before I went there. I lived off the grid in the woods in Arkansas, in the
Wow.
Ozark Mountains,
Do you
and
think that would be possible today, like it was in your
no,
time frame?
not well, maybe, but you'd have to have money to buy a piece of land.
Mm.
At
I
the
just don't
time,
think people.
Arkansas, an old man was living in his cabin that he couldn't live in
Mm.
anymore because he was too sick.
It's something that it doesn't come up as much in Canada as it does in the States. But off the grid, off the grid, off the grid, and it's discussions that come up all the time. And you hear people say, well, that's easy to say, but off the grid is like no cell phone, and you don't have any internet, and there's not going to be like a little access post in your situation. You're like you're done with all that stuff.
Right, right.
And
Well, this was pre-internet, but yeah, I mean, we had a taste of it with the Texas snowpocalypse that happened in February, when people 700 at least 700 people died in Texas from that.
I wish I could find the article for you. Maybe I'll do some rummaging and send it to you on Twitter. We did it in the one social science classes I was teaching. Everybody, it's a sex cult, or it's this, or it's that, or they're doing something wrong. And the daughter of the guy who was running this commune, I think they were outside of New Hampshire, basically said, none of that happened. It was all above board. It just exactly what you were saying. It became more expensive every year to be able to run this. And the basic amenities that they needed to have their children go further in life just weren't there. So he finally said, screw it, and went and became a professor. I cannot.
That might be the same place I'm from, the farm. It's called.
Oh, wow. Let me see if I can track it down for you. It was in a big magazine, so it shouldn't be too hard to do. But
well, I made lifelong friends there. My kids have friends that met since they were babies.
It was super interesting because nobody had an axe to grind. Nobody was saying this is what happened, or we were assaulted or whatever. They said it just became too big to make work.
That's exactly what it was. It must be somebody. Could even be somebody I know. But living off the grid though was very good. Was a huge help with this book because I knew exactly how to live off the grid, and I was able to write it in the book. And a lot of people thought, "Oh, you must have done so much research." I'm like, "Well, no, actually, I just lived it. I lived off the grid, so I know what it's
Do you think it just becomes too much for people at a certain age, or is it still the economic thing?
Well, both. I think it's both. I mean, now the farm is still there, and a couple hundred people live there, but they have electricity and all that.
I don't consider myself old, but I'll be 51 at the end of the month. There's been a couple times within the last couple of months, maybe it's the inactivity with COVID, but I'm like, well, I'm going to do this today. You're halfway through it, and I'm like, I'm white. I got to go lay down. I can't do this anymore. Then we were just talking about it today, and I said, is there something wrong with me? My girlfriend said, no, just you're getting older. I was never that guy that accepted that I was getting older. And when you have so much work-related responsibilities in somewhere like a farm, that must be very pressuring when especially not that the females don't work, but the men who are supposed to do a lot of the heavy labor, are starting to hit 60, 65, 70 years old. It must make it very difficult.
Well, there's some second generation, even third generation people living there to do some of that, but they don't do nearly as much farming as they used to. They have gardens, you know. But I
Brenda,
no,
we're
I
going to wrap
didn't.
this up. Don't take off. So I want to talk to you for a minute when the camera goes off. Thank you so much for your time. Everybody, if you are looking to get caught up with what we were speaking about, you are looking for Brenda Marie Smith. I will have her links posted, the Amazon, the page, the website, Twitter, the whole deal. We talked about If Darkness Takes Us. If you are looking for the upcoming one, which about 2 months, maybe 9 weeks, August 24th, If the Light Escapes. The next time we have Brenda on, we will absolutely be talking about If Darkness Takes Us. And hopefully we will have time to talk about If the Light Escapes as well.
That sounds great.
I thank you so much for your time. I'll see you soon, okay?
Okay, I'm looking
Bye
forward to
now.
it. Bye-bye.